to talking about Ujub, which is most easily translated as self-amazement. So the author, he starts, Ahmed ibn Qudama rahmatullahi alayh. Actually, before I get too far into this, I just want to reiterate what Hassan Bhai had just been saying. Inshallah, we all make dua for this brother who apparently must have wanted to keep his name secret. May Allah reward him for that. That is from the talks that we've been having. We know that that desire to keep the name hidden is one of the aspects that inshallah protects from the arrogance that we can fall victim to, and being hidden and trying to hide our good deeds as much as possible, but doing what needs to be done. So may Allah grant him Jannatul Firdaus. May Allah reward him immeasurably, many times more than what he is sacrificed for the sake of this ummah, for our families, for our community. And may it be blessed and pleasing in his sight and a source of good and barakah for this entire community. And we pray, inshallah, for his success and our own, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen. So as I was saying, we're talking about Ujub, self-amazement, and the author, Ahmed ibn Qudama rahmatullahi alayhi, starts off by narrating a few things from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that relate to this particular subject. And as I said, inshallah, it'll be short tonight. So he starts narrating from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu an, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بينما رجل يتبختر في بردين وقد أعجبته نفسه خسف الله به الأرض فهو تجلجل فيها إلى يوم القيامة. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying here that there came a man who was, the way it was translated is strutting. He's making a show of himself in two burdas, two cloaks. And because of this, he was amazed with himself. He was feeling very much, as we would say in the West, as if his stuff doesn't stink. He was feeling very good about himself, that he was dressed in these fine garments. And he continues and says that Allah caused the earth to swallow him, and that he remains being, and the translation for yatajaljala is a little challenging, but the closest I can approximate is being sucked into the earth until Yawm al-Qiyamah. Until Yawm al-Qiyamah, because of the haughtiness and this show that he was making of himself, thinking so highly of himself because of this mundane thing of having these burda that he thought were so fine and so excellent. So a caution against us having this ujub. He was saying he ajabtahu, was amazed with himself. Amazed with himself. And he narrates another one here. I believe this is also from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu an. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة محلكات. There are three things that are truly destructive. شح المطاع. Miserliness or self-centeredness that is obeyed. Hawa mu'tabi', desires which are followed. And lastly, ijab al-mar'i bi nafsi, that a man or a woman is amazed with themselves, is overwhelmed with how great they are. As we say sometimes, that you begin to believe your own hype. All the good you hear people say about you, you begin to believe it. You begin to believe that you are wonderful. And as the author mentions later on in this section, that what ujub implies is this believing to have achieved a state of perfection in terms of knowledge or action. That we feel that somehow we've achieved some status or some rank in terms of our knowledge or our actions, and so we see ourselves as high and mighty in that regard. There's another statement he mentions here, this from the companion Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu an, where he said, al-halak fi shay'ain, that destruction comes in two things. First one he said, ujub, self-amazement. And the other one, qunut, to be, actually it was translated as despairing, but actually it implies great despairing, an excessive amount of despair. And so he said, when you join between these two, he joined between two of them, he said, because happiness or being blessed, and being successful in the next life, happiness or being blessed does not come except by seeking for that thing, seeking for it and looking after it to achieve that happiness, doing the things that require the sa'ada to be required for you. And he said, so for the first one, the qanit, the one who has this qunut, who is this excessively despairing, they're so in such great despair that they just give up action altogether. This is like when you think of clinically depressed. This is a person, when the person becomes clinically depressed, they barely have the willpower to get out of bed or feed themselves or clothe themselves or do anything for themselves at all. This is the sort of despair that it's referring to, that it stops them from even attempting to search. They need it, they want it, but they feel so overwhelmed with despair that they don't even try. And the other one, the one who is filled with this ujub, this self-amazement, they don't try either, but they don't try for a different reason. They don't try because they think they've already achieved what it is that they're looking for. They're convinced that they've achieved their end goal. And obviously the implied meaning here is that they believe they've achieved it, even though this is a false assumption about themselves. So they both are destructive, excessive any belief or excessive opinion of oneself, and then this despair, which is really essentially the opposite of that, an excessive negative opinion of oneself, to the point that both of them immobilize you. Fear, actually, I was just recently, this is slightly related. Both fear and hope are somewhat related to these two things. If you hope too much, then you have this ujub. You've become so convinced of your worthiness that excessive hope causes you to stop working because you feel that you have no need for it. You have such excessive hope, you don't work. Just as excessive fear leads to this despair, and this qunut, this also stops the action, and it doesn't allow for it. Fear and hope, when they're properly balanced, are fear and hope that still promote us into action to change the condition that we feel that we're in. And so he continues to mention that one of the interesting things is, if you remember, we were talking about kibr earlier, and the author mentions here that this ujub, or this self-amazement gives birth to arrogance. In other words, that feeling of self-amazement is what precedes the true feeling of arrogance in a person's heart. When you begin to believe things so strongly about yourself that then you get to a point where you become arrogant, where now you take that same attitude, that same feeling that you have within, and you begin to impose it upon others. Like we were saying in the section on kibr, I was saying, ghamtu nas, you look down, you have contempt for the people, so you're inflicting your attitude and your opinions upon others by looking down upon them, seeing them as beneath you, and batrul haq. And when people try to bring you the truth, you reject the truth out of hand because you feel as if, I don't need it anymore. I'm so great, what have you to offer me? And so this is the danger. It starts though with this ujub, this feeling inside of ourselves that somehow we've achieved some level of perfection in these qualities, and therefore we deserve a certain status, and it starts to complicate itself even further beyond that. And so all of this is very dangerous, and we mentioned the definition of it, etc. So this is just briefly defining and pointing out to us the danger and the nature of this self-amazement and what it leads to. When as it said, it is the father, if you will, of arrogance. And so it's greatly dangerous. So next week, inshallah, after Maghrib, we'll talk about, and this is the end of this chapter, we'll talk about the remedy and the cure for this self-amazement, this self-aggrandizement. Inshallah ta'ala. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.